Hello, writers, and welcome back to Spooky Writes, your channel all about writing. I'm your host, who is secretly a ghost, Kemal Onor. Now, do you have plans for a 12-part series ready to span the next decade? Today, we're talking about if your book actually needs a sequel. So make sure if you get any value from this video, make sure to give it a good thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Help it grow. It means a lot. And with that said, let's head into the storm.
It's the raven's call, the werewolf's howl, the vampire's bite. You search through the woods for safety, but all you find is... Okay, rights.
So you've written a book, or have plans to write a book? Is it going to be a standalone, or part of a series? Is it something you need to plan in advance? Well, personally, I believe beginning writers need to avoid writing series because most of the time it results in a lot of planning of books that you never actually get to. Book 1 will have dragons and a love story. Book 2 will have dark magic. Book 3, we discover he is actually a werewolf.
Bella!
All of this results in a lot more planning and a lot less writing. You don't need to be thinking about book 5 if you haven't even written book 1. Of course, it is important to have a roadmap if you are writing a big, long series. But beginning writers, you need to focus on one book at a time. I've touched on this topic before about how so many beginning writers fall into the novel trap. Planning out a series is a novel trap times however many books you have planned. It's 15. Your first step as a beginning writer should be to not focus on a series. Instead, write short stories. Focus on developing the writing habit. Focus on developing the writing habit of starting and actually finishing something. Write a short story of 1,000 to 2,000 words. Write several flash pieces or quick novella. The biggest problem that beginning writers face is getting stuck in the planning stage. Getting stuck in the middle, never actually completing the work. It can be fun to plan out a 5-book series, but it does you no good if you never write that first book. But planning to write and talking about writing is the same thing as writing, right? No, it does not. Unless you are sitting down and actually working on your piece, then you are not writing. Thinking about writing is not writing. Planning books that you haven't gotten to yet, that's not writing. Writing is the act of sitting down in a room by yourself and talking and listening to the voices in your head. Remember, insanity is when you actually talk back to those voices. I highly recommend that you start with short stories first. Start with shorter novels first. Practice finishing and completing work before you have a big sprawling plan of 12-book series that are going to span the next 2 decades of your life trying to complete, and you'll more than likely never complete book 1, much less book 7. And if you get to the end of a short story and tell yourself this doesn't feel complete, there's still more to it, there's more to be explored, then you can ask yourself this question.
And then?
But it's important to be honest with yourself because not every story needs a sequel. Books are perfectly fine as standalone works. I would advise you as a beginning writer to focus on one book at a time. Focus on writing your first book before thinking about a sequel. But if you write a book and feel like there's more to it and that the story is not complete and that there's enough material to consist and create a second book, then by all means, then plan out that next book. But it feels like such a waste of time to plan out 6, 7, 8+ books for a series when you haven't even practiced the act of completing one book. So as a beginning writer, focus on one book at a time and make that book as good as you can possibly make it. Focus all your attention on that one book. Don't worry about book 3 where things actually get cool. Make your book 1 the cool book. Make book 1 the book that you put all your heart and energy into. Make that first book as good as you can possibly make it. Then if you get to the end of that book and you say, there's still more to this story that I want to explore. I want to explore this relationship that I hinted at in this first book. By all means, then think about book 2 and how you can generate enough material for book 2. I highly recommend you focus on one book at a time, because as a beginning writer, you need to get into the habit of starting and finishing and completing work before you have your epic series that chronicles the next decade and a half of your life. Because you don't want to fall into the trap of planning out books that you're never going to get to. Again, planning out book 8, if you haven't written the first 7 books already, there's no reason for you to be thinking about book 8. Book 8's going to be so cool. Book 8 is where we're going to discover that he's the true king of the land. It doesn't matter if you haven't written the first book, if you haven't written all those other books beforehand. Make that first book as good as you can possibly make it, and then move on from there. Writing is so much more than just planning. You actually have to do the work of sitting down and writing. And as far as which is more profitable, a standalone novel versus a series, if that standalone novel if you put all your heart and soul into that standalone novel and make it as good as you can possibly be, it's going to be so much better than 5 or 6, 7, or however many books you have planned. If all those books are mediocre, they're probably not going to sell nearly as well as one solid book that you can be proud of. You don't want to be creating sequels that are not necessary to the story. You don't want to end up creating stories where there's not enough material and you have 5 books that are just scanty with not enough of a story there to carry all 5 books. If you have enough for one book, write one book. If you happen to have enough material to write 5, 6, or 7 books, then write 5, 6, or 7 books. I'm not saying that sequels are a bad thing. What I'm saying is that putting all your heart and attention to planning and mapping out a 12-book chronicle is not a good way to go as a beginning writer. As a beginning writer, you need to be focusing on finishing one book. Don't forget, if you want to support this channel, you can always purchase my book in the links down below. And with that, keep it spooky.
And now we must return to the shadows.